It's been researched several times.
What
We
is
had
the
special
issue
meetings. Oh, well, part of the issue is that, just to start with, to put in a speed bump here, we would have to pay $10,000, which is non-refundable. That's just, you give them $10,000 for a bond. You never see that $10,000 again. That's one speed bump. So it's $10,000 per speed bump. Then we are responsible for the upkeep and all of that goes with that. We have to have a traffic study. They generally start around $40,000. And then, if we do get them installed, and someone is speeding through here and they damage their car while they're speeding through the community, we're liable for the damage, whether they were speeding or not. We have to pay for the damage on their cars. So, they can turn out to be just a huge liability for the community. Now, if we were a gated community and we had speed bumps and stuff, that might be helpful, because the people who are gonna be in there are the ones who are gonna, they damage their cars, they're paying for it one way or another. Here, we've got all kinds of people driving through, whether they live here or not. That's a whole different issue. But it's just a matter, how much are you willing to pay? Because in order to raise your dues enough to cover that, we have to have 67% of all residents, of all homeowners, vote to approve that. Otherwise, there's no way we could raise the dues enough to cover that. And we certainly couldn't get enough in reserves to cover that. And then we would not be able to do anything else but have speed bumps. We couldn't upkeep the pool, we couldn't do any of that.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
Hey, just, I don't know if anyone else noticed, but there's a house when you're driving on the rental property that's being, what's being done about that? Cause it looks terrible. I don't know if there's anything you guys can do.
Yeah,
just
and
looks
you know
so
what,
bad
you have
every time.
such a good heart for the way you volunteered for that. But sadly, all I can say is the board is doing everything that we are allowed by law to do to get that taken care of, and we're not stopping.
I'm sorry, what is it?
Oh, it's a house on Blackwood at the end, by going to Target, go down to the left, it's like, grass up to here. It's really, really bad if anyone.
It is, it's very bad.
It's the worst.
Is there an issue with the owner or?
It's owned by the rental,
It's owned by a rental
the
company.
investment company, so.
Yeah, it's not like an individual.
Oh, it's vacant.
And your investment company can't keep up with mowing the lawns like everybody else does?
So
Oh, they're
they're
supposed to.
I
They're
mean,
supposed to.
we
can't
have
tell you
visibility of the
exactly
lease,
what we're
so if
doing.
it is on the owner and the owner's not taking care of it, because we don't find the owner, we find the investment company. So if the investment company wants to keep
Find the renter.
the renter, sorry, it's
the owner.
it's the owner.
It's the owner, yeah.
The rental company. So if it doesn't translate down, they don't know. But yes, we are tackling it.
Can we cut it and put the bill on them?
No,
There's a process before we
yeah,
get that far.
Okay.
So,
and we have to,
legally,
Right.
we have to follow all the steps, because there can be liability for us.
believe us, one of us would have been over there mowing the
Oh,
lawn
God,
already.
yes.
But
Them
legally,
volunteers
we
here.
have to do the steps.
Is it vacant? Or is there people living there?
You
We
know,
don't know.
There's cars outside.
Yeah, I don't think it's
Yeah.
I
vacant.
know it's like a mosquito or
Yeah.
Terminator or something.
yeah,
We're working on it. We're working on it.
trust me, we're just as frustrated with that as anybody, if not more.
Well, I can more than that.
Any other questions?
Just a quick one. Just want to take a moment and say we live in a great community and you guys are doing a great job. So we need to thank you. I know it's a thankless job. So we don't say that enough. So thank you for that. You guys volunteers, your terms are, some of you up for, after 2 years of serving. So thank you. Talking about the elections and all that, are you guys planning like a mail like last year? Is there a deadline before candidates can submit their bios before the mail is gone out?
Yeah, there's so on the website you can actually put in. There's a link to submit your information. So, yeah, you can submit that at any time during the
Okay.
year. So sure, we will send out an annual notice of the meeting, but that's just, I would say, that's like the last
That
huge
should have the
publication.
bio.
Yeah, so you
Okay.
can submit any information you want out.
So is there a time before those mails are going out? Like you guys plan them in maybe November, or you have no times yet?
They'll be going out very soon.
Very soon.
Soon?
Um,
Okay.
But bios typically don't get mailed out.
Okay. I think 1 year you guys did that, but maybe not every year.
Because we had them in time.
Gotcha.
So the sooner you get it in,
We can do it in email blast as far as
Yeah,
that
we
goes.
can do it in email.
Do you guys need some of us to step up, or you guys are good?
I'm sorry.
Do you guys need some of us to step up and help, or you guys are good to,
Well, we don't know who's.
I think some of us,
The nomination form just went out, so
Yeah, it just went
we
through
don't know
email.
who's.
I think it takes a lot of time and effort and dedication to be here, so we do appreciate that, and
Thank you.
Uh,
Thank you, Joseph.
and it's always hard, to kind of sacrifice some of your time for that, so we do appreciate that, so we're thinking as well, so thank you.
Yeah, that went out, was it last week that went out, or the week before last?
I believe so, that's on.
Yes,
Yeah.
my time frame got messed up last week.
I think.
So, yeah, there was an email that went out, I thought I remember seeing it, where people could submit their, self-nominate,
Nomination.
submit their bios, and you fill out that form. But it is on the website too,
It's on
right?
the
So anybody can go to the website, pull that up, fill it out, send it in.
That went out in the mail?
No, not gonna be
It
email.
was email. Yeah, there's only, I think, what did I say, 12 houses that are not on our email list, and they're rentals, I believe, so they would be voting anyway.
I just have a quick question, only because I don't know how this works in a closed meeting. Fencing is on the agenda. You said something about a closed discussion. Is fencing discussion gonna be closed or an open discussion?
So it's open for the members to hear, but per the governing documents, the board meetings are open in an observatory capacity. So it's not an open dialogue between the board and the residents. So it's for you guys to observe them conducting their meeting.
I sort of have a question that goes along with that. So this is the board meeting, we get our 15 minutes. Is there ever any time that there's more time? I mean, it seems like every time there's more that people want to discuss than 15 minutes.
And
Or
every
does it
meeting,
need to
people
be
do
here?
discuss meeting.
Yeah, you can go on and email the management company, you can get in contact with us and.
Well,
any
sometimes I
questions?
don't know there's an issue until I hear it here. And then I'm like, oh yeah, I have something to say about that too.
I
But,
think
you
her
know,
question is.
yeah.
can we
It just
a
seems like
town
our
hall
15 minutes goes
sort
by
of
very fast.
Well, we usually do go over 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't think of one meeting we've had,
I mean,
we didn't go over 15 minutes, we're already over.
We're already
15
over
minutes,
15 minutes, so.
so. Yeah, I can't think of a time when we haven't.
Any
Oh,
other
I got a
questions?
question. So why is that only for, and I understand it's the government document, but what's the reasoning behind it? That we only listen but may not contribute to the conversation?
Because the membership elected these people to serve as your board of directors, so it's their fiduciary duty to make the decisions for the community. And so that was the reasoning for that.
Gotcha, so we can't even contribute to the conversation? I'm sure people out there got opinions about,
So from
Okay.
time to time, the board may ask for feedback, but it is in an observatory capacity. It's also so the board can stay on track, so that they can stay within their allotted time frame for their meetings. Because they do have the general session, then they also have a closed executive session afterwards. So they do have quite a bit of business that they need to get through. And some items that they do have to do behind closed doors because of privacy laws. So that's the reason for that.
But if anybody ever has any input, they can always email us. If you don't get to say your piece here, you're always welcome to email us or contact one of us.
Or even if you don't come to a meeting, you don't even have to be at the meeting to let us know what's on your mind, what you're thinking of. We will not be responding on Facebook, however, so you want to send that through support, and they'll refer that on to us for, yep. To use that email.
I was looking at everything through.
Yeah, just email support@qster.com and they'll pass it on to us. They don't, you know, anytime there's an inquiry or something, they generally get back to us and say, this is what we received from so-and-so. How do you want us to respond? Do you want to respond? You know, how do you want to do this?
And the board does meet every month, it's just, we have quarterly meetings, we have hearings, and we discuss other business every month. So if you have a question that you were suggesting that you want us to discuss, like next month, we review again.
You
So it's
don't
not
have
like
to
we
wait
meet
for-
every, you know, you don't have to wait for a next quarterly meeting, if that makes sense.
So if you think of something tomorrow or next week, and you think, I'd like for them, I want some information on this, send it on to support, we will discuss it at our next meeting, and you'll be advised, you'll get a response.
So I had a question, because I think there was two items, when I had asked for the fencing to be on the agenda, there was actually another, question that was posed, and that was how updates to the handbook were made, because the handbook does not prescribe how those updates are being made. And so if I could have that question addressed.
It's actually in the DCCRs.
No, actually it's not, it's
I think
the
or is it
CCNRs.
bylaws?
The bylaws state that the rules, which imply are the CCNRs by law, are addressed. The CCNRs, don't have any accommodation for how they are addressing the handbook. And
Well,
so,
we're
and I
required to
asked
send it
that,
out to everybody.
so I asked that because handbooks, when you enter into a discussion of what is in a handbook versus a CCNR, handbooks are only allowed to expand on what is in a CCNR.
Mhm.
And so if you're seeing, and this is relative to the conversation related to fencing,
Okay.
is if your CCNRs specify that only a certain type of fencing or material is allowed, your handbook cannot impose additional rules on top of that. And so that is what I went looking for, is where is the rule that, or the allowance that was made to put additional restrictions within the handbook that were not in the CCNRs. Because, I'm just saying this because I'm concerned for this, for my personal, but I'm concerned as someone who has been in your capacity for many, many years. And believe me, I have the greatest respect because I don't even want to tell you what I went through in your position. There's a reason why I'm not there. But that can raise a lot of questions if you are using a handbook to expand the rules of your CCNRs without going through appropriate process.
Yeah.
And so I'm concerned when I went and I was following from the bylaws to the CCNRs to the handbook, and I could not make that association.
Well, someplace in there, and I'm sorry, I can't
It's okay.
give you
I understand.
right where it is.
Section 1.28 of the CCNR's rules and regulations.
Okay, thank you.
Rules and regulations mean reasonable and non-discriminatory rules and regulations as may be adopted from time to time by the association, provided notice of such rules and regulations has been given to owners in accordance with the requirements in this declaration.
Right.
So you are correct, they cannot be more restrictive than the
Correct.
CCNRs, they can clarify gray areas.
Correct.
So the fence rule is only in the handbook, right? In the
Right,
handbook.
well, there
Yes.
is a fence rule in the DCCRs.
Right, but it's
But
more restrictive in
it
the
doesn't-
handbook, and that's her point,
Right,
is that
it
there
is.
was no
It is,
authority
and we have
to
been
grant
discussing it.
that, so.
That's correct.
You're right.
Come to the same conclusion, so I agree with you.
And,
And
you know,
we've been
if
discussing
you
it.
ever are in doubt, you can always submit an ARC request and we can grant a variance. Just because it says absolutely not, or how the handbook says it, doesn't mean it's always, you know, the ground truth. So, that is part of a revision
Weird
that we're
argument to
looking
make
at.
to me. It's a weird argument to make to me.
Thank you, because I know there was some place
Yeah,
where,
when I
because
saw
when
that, I
we,
was
when
like-
changes were made to the handbook, when that particular change was made to the handbook about the fencing, there was a committee, a rules committee, I wanna say it was 2008.
Has to be because of this one.
And they, I remember specifically because my husband was on that committee. There was someone from the estates, there was someone from the Glen, and then he was on there from the Oaks, and there was somebody else, I can't remember who. But anyway, the residents from the Glen and the estates wanted to put in that rule that the Glen and the estates could only have aluminum fencing. And that's what they wanted for them, and my husband said to them, no, you can't carve yourselves out like that. If there's gonna be a rule, it has to be a rule for all three communities, and truthfully, that's the way it is. And so that committee voted, it went up to the board approved that change. Then it had to be mailed out to every resident, and it was. And residents had 10 days to make comments on that, to object to it. If there was no objection and there was no contact, then it became part of the handbook. And my understanding is that nothing was ever said, that it just went. And that's how that ended up there, from
So
my
my
understanding.
suggestion in that case would be that the handbook probably needs to be updated to
Yes.
And
say,
we are in the
this,
process of that.
this is how these updates get made, because it does need clarification. There is
Yeah.
nothing in the handbook that says, this is how these changes get made to the handbook. This is how a resident can go about it suggesting changes.
Well, you did the changes that last time you were president, and, I mean, there was a whole big discussion on Facebook about it, and I remember somebody rewrote everything.
Meetings and.
Yeah, we had all kinds of input from residents on that one.
And we didn't, in 2016, we didn't have any major changes, we just kind of clarified things that were kind of.
We kind of condensed it a little bit, and that was on.
Yeah,
That was a deer.
Yeah.
So if the fencing change was made, a committee voted on it, and then they went through the board, and then residents were notified, right? And they could do their input, but eventually it was just the rules passed by committee. So
What she's saying is that it doesn't sound like the proper process went through, because essentially if you make it more restrictive, you're bypassing the CCRs to make a rule in the handbook that doesn't require a 2/3 vote. So you could put anything in the handbook as long as you send out notice, and that's not really